So my big concern with extended absences is that it puts you at a disadvantage. You'll never be penalized by me, but a lot of times if you miss a bunch of class, like, you get behind, and sometimes people can't ever get caught up. I want a heads up. I want to talk about it if we can. And if you're somebody who doesn't have an extended absence, you're not going out of the country for a month, or a family reunion or whatever, but you just are gone a lot. Maybe you're sick a lot, or maybe you have athletics or appointments or whatever. Then just understand that you will not be directly penalized by me for that. Absolutely not. But indirectly, it's really hard to learn the stuff if you're not here. So if you are gone once a week or more on average, just know, it's awfully hard to get an A in AP Biology if you're not here at least 80 or 90% of the time. You can do it, maybe, but I wouldn't count on it. You all are smart and capable and hardworking, but if you're not here, you're just not here. And the analogy that I've been using for this is getting your driver's license, right? Like, if you want to get your driver's license, but let's say you're overseas, you can't practice driving, that's okay. You can study the driver's manual, and you can watch YouTube videos, and you can do all the work. You could work 24 hours a day studying stuff to be a good driver. And then when you come back to the States, you're going to ace the written part of your driving exam, and you won't know how to drive a vehicle. In order to drive, you have to practice. And that's a lot of the stuff that we do in here is going to be analogous to that. So just know, if you're gone a lot, it might affect your grade. It's not going to be because you're being penalized. It's going to be because it's hard to learn everything if you're not here. Reassessment. So I'm going to go through this really quickly. Basically, the deal is, if you want an A, don't rely on reassessments. If you're okay with a B or a C, reassessments are a great strategy. This is typically for people who are hardworking and just don't test well. And there's many of us out there. It's not anything to be ashamed of. It happens a lot. And so if you want to pass the class or get a B, but you just can't help it. Like, no matter how hard you work, you don't do well on tests, retakes are a great way to do it. You need to have all of the formative and employability skills work turned in before the original test in order to get a reassessment. And you have a week to do the reassessment after the original grade is recorded. If you come to me and you say, okay, I saw that I got a 78 on the exam, can I do a retake? I can't do it next week, can we do it the week after? Then we can make a plan in writing. So this can be extended, but the default understanding is you have a week. And if we don't talk about it in person, then you miss that week window, then you're out. And then I don't think this is gonna be necessary for anybody in here, but just know that if you're frequently gone on test day, then or if you are always asking for reassessments and I'm not confident that you know the material, then I might ask you to show me what you know in a different way. We might sit down and talk about it. I might have you make a presentation, or we might do like a lab demo or something. So it doesn't have to be the original same version of the same exam or quiz. All right, and then the last thing is all the stuff that I've talked about and all of the stuff on the course syllabus, I'm not going to make exceptions. And the reason that I'm not going to do it is because I'm a pushover. I want to say yes to all of you. I think it doesn't serve you well that I like you and want you to be happy to the point that I will let you shirk responsibilities. I do it all the time. It doesn't work out well for you, and it often doesn't work out well for me either. So I am shifting the way that I deal with exceptions. If you want an exception, there's going to be a little form. I haven't made up, I haven't printed it yet, but you'll see it on Monday. And I'll fill out an example one so you can see what it looks like. But basically what you'll do is you'll say, oh, hey, yeah, I know we don't do retakes on formative work, but my uncle was in the hospital when we did this assignment. I did really bad. I would like to have a chance to do a retake on that because of those circumstances. And then you take it home, have somebody at home sign it, parent or guardian, and then bring it back to me, and I'm going to take it to somebody else, somebody who is better at saying no than me, and I'm going to say, hey, is this a reasonable, exception? And if they say yes, you're in, and if they say no, then you're out. It's not gonna be me who makes the decision. And that is to protect you and from my like pushover nature, and it's to protect me from getting myself into trouble when I give students too many exceptions and I have too much flexibility. So that, my fine feathered friends, is that. Nope, hang on. Okay, not yet. I gotta get the timing of this down. Okay, there it is. I don't know why it does that. This is weird. This computer is really weird, but every time I give a presentation, it just like, it really has to work to switch. Hold tight, we're not gonna do this quite yet. We are. You can get your notes out, but I have just a couple last other things to say. The first is that the course syllabus has been posted to Canvas now, and it's an assignment. So what I'm gonna ask you to do is read it with a parent or guardian, and then you can either print it out and sign it, or you can just write a little note on a piece of paper saying, we read and understand the course syllabus, and sign that. I want you to take a picture of your signed acknowledgement, turn that in on Canvas, and then I want you to bring me the signature sheet as well. And that is going to be the last that we talk about the syllabus as a class. Everything else we'll talk about individually if we need to.
Wait, so we print this out on our own, or are you passing out a paper?
I'm not going to pass it out. You can just, that's why, because it just seems like it's just sort of a waste. So it's on, you can read it online, and then you can just write a little note, even on scrap paper.
Oh, okay.
We read and understand it, and then sign it, and then take a picture of that and turn it in. And that way we don't have a bunch of paper copies of stuff. All right, so we are going to, I'm going to have you all do two things today. You're going to, and so we're going to kind of break up my talking. I'm going to talk to you for a little bit about some chemistry stuff that's going to be, I think, review for everyone. And then we're going to do monkey things. And then I'm going to talk to you a little bit more about chemistry, and then you're going to have an assignment. You'll have time to work on it in class, but it's also going to be homework if you don't finish it. So we'll break things up. This first piece is pretty short. Okay, watch what happens. It's going to do the thing again. Watch. It's going to be presenter view up here. See? I don't want that. I want this on my screen. And I want you to see what I was saying on this screen. I need help. Okay, so as I told you before, when we do notes in this class, as I'm kind of coaching you through it, I will tell you what to write down. And you do not need to write down anything on this slide. This is just for, like, you should be familiar with most of these elements. And I just want you to get a sense for the fact that if you look at, like, oxygen, carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, calcium, phosphorus, potassium, sulfur, sodium, chlorine, that's the majority. Like, most living things are made up mostly of those elements, those chemical elements. There's a bunch of other things like magnesium and manganese and silicon and zinc. If you take a multivitamin, you'll see a bunch of these things in there, right? And if you buy big containers of salt from the store, you'll see that those are iodized, so they have iodine in them. And there's other elements. Some organisms have other elements in them. There's organisms that have arsenic in them, for example. But for the most part, there's not that much that goes into making a living organism in terms of the actual substances. When we look at where these elements are located in human beings, in living organisms, this is something that you should have an idea of. I would write this down because I think it's a good exercise, but we find all these elements in chunks of stuff, building blocks, things that on their own don't do anything, but when you put them together with other things, they do. We find them in finished molecules. So, there might be a phosphate group that's got phosphorus and oxygen. On its own, that doesn't do much. But when you take it and you add it to a adenosine diphosphate, it becomes adenosine triphosphate, which is a super powerful energy molecule. We find them in fluids. So we have these elements are in our blood, they're in our spinal fluid, they're everywhere in a living organism. They're even in between cells. And one really good example of this is your brain, because the way that your neurons work is one neuron sprays chemicals out of it, and those chemicals are picked up by another neuron. So actually, in order for you to think, chemicals have to be outside of the cells in your body. That's how our brains work. One neuron, basically, it's like perfume almost, right? Like, and then somebody else can smell it, and that's how thoughts work. And in general, what we care about chemistry and elements and all the things that elements do, because this is the basis for the structures in living organisms, and this is the basis for storing energy in living organisms. We're going to be talking about structure more next week. We're going to start by just looking at some sort of general stuff, but I want to talk about cellular energy a little bit, because we think about energy is something that's used, and that's a fine way to frame it as an analogy. But the truth is, we don't actually use energy. There's no such thing as using energy. What we do is we move energy, and as we move it, it can do stuff. So when we look at energy in cells and in living organisms, they need a constant input of energy. That's why humans and other animals have to eat. That's why plants need to photosynthesize. They need a constant input of energy. That energy gets moved around and transformed. It's stored in different places. It's used to do things. It literally pushes things around. Energetic atoms and ions and molecules can make things move. And that energy gets moved around and transformed until it exits the organism. Typically, the way that it exits the organism is as chemical energy, which is like a waste product, or as heat energy. Like we are great generators of heat. Human beings are super efficient at taking, hamburgers and turning it into 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit. We'll come back to this. We're going to talk about the laws of thermodynamics at some point, and we'll come back to this. But the key thing here is to recognize that it's a flow. Energy flows, inputs to outputs, and it does stuff in the middle. It's not really ever used. Okay, there's the same amount of energy before and after it's passed through a living organism. One of the main chemical compounds that we're going to need to think about is ATP, and I just mentioned this, but now you get a chance to actually write it down. So ATP is the abbreviation for a chemical called adenosine triphosphate. How many of you have heard of ATP before? Yeah, it's not a big mysterious thing for most of you. It's small, it's soluble in water, and it has a lot of energy that it can transmit to other things. The energy is sort of stored in the arrangement of the chemical bonds. It has these three chunks of phosphorus and oxygen together. That's called the phosphate group. You'll see that in the second part of class today. And in order for all those things to be attached to each other, you have to put a lot of energy into it, and then that energy gets kind of locked in there like a mousetrap. And so ATP is like a little mousetrap floating around in your cells. And like a little mousetrap, it's pretty easy to trigger it. So ATP is the most useful energetic molecule in cells when you need to get something done. It's not a great molecule for storing energy over the long term. So since ATP is relatively short-lived, we generally find energy in other places in living organisms. And you all know what kinds of molecules are involved with energy storage. There's lipids, there's carbohydrates, there's proteins. There's energy in nucleic acids too. There's energy in every chemical compound in a living organism. And we'll look at all of that stuff later. When we look at, sorry, I didn't mean to do that. When we look at how energy ends up being used, and so remember, it doesn't get used up. What we do is we move energy around. So it starts in one place and it goes somewhere else, and it goes somewhere else, and it goes somewhere else. And as it does it, it can make things happen. It can change the shape or structure of things. It can make things move that weren't moving already. And so living organisms need movement, even inside organisms like plants that aren't mobile. There is movement going on in plants all the time. Substances are moving around within cells. Substances are moving from one cell to another cell. So you got to have movement in order for there to be living organisms. So here are the kinds of things that we use energy for. We need energy for organisms to grow, to reproduce. We use energy to maintain what's called homeostasis. So this is like a balance system where if something gets a little out of whack, then there's a feedback mechanism that brings it back into whack. And body temperature for warm-blooded organisms is the classic example of that. If you get too cold, you'll start to shiver, and you, like humans with brains, will like go inside and warm up. If you get too hot, you sweat, or you go find someplace cool, and that system of biological and behavioral feedback mechanisms keeps humans at the ideal stable body temperature much of the time. And then we use energy to maintain organization. So organization, as it turns out, it is costly. How many of you, I think you probably learned about entropy, right? In chemistry, did you learn about entropy? Entropy is disorganization, that's it. So in order for living organisms to stave off entropy, they need a constant source of energy. And the irony, of course, because of the laws of thermodynamics, is that we are highly organized, living things, and humans in particular, are very highly organized. Our high organization necessarily increases the amount of disorganization, of entropy somewhere else. So life is basically a way to accelerate entropy. It's kind of crazy to think about it from that point of view. Okay, and then we talked a little bit about, we talked about ATP, but we'll talk about more chemical compounds that store energy. But basically, in living organisms, when we store energy, we store it in the bonds between elements, or between chunks of elements that are grouped together. And if you ask somebody who really understands this, they will say the energy is not stored in the bond. But I'm going to say that because A, I'm not sure why there's arguments about it. I haven't put that much thought into it. And B, it makes a lot of sense. So just think about the energy being stored in the bond. Yeah, Samson?
What would they say otherwise?
What's that?
What would they say otherwise?
I don't know. You have to ask them.
Okay.
I really mean it. Like, I don't, it's not, that's not something that's interested me enough that I've looked into it. And then what that means is that in order for energy to be transformed and moved and to do all the stuff that it needs to do, we have to have chemical reactions. So the reason that we're thinking about chemistry at all, we started by talking about water, and now we're talking about some of the elements involved in life, and we're going to talk about bigger chemicals in a moment, is because this is really what life is all about. It's a bunch of chemical reactions taking place inside like a bag, right? Our cells are essentially a semi-permeable bag full of chemicals in solution. One really good example of this, and you do not need to write this down, some of you are probably familiar with this equation, all of you will be down the road. Cellular respiration is how living organisms get glucose from food. Glucose is a molecule that can hold a lot of energy, and sorry, not glucose, ATP. We get ATP from our food. Our food comes in the form of glucose, which has a lot of energy, and cellular respiration takes that glucose, breaks it apart, and takes the energy that was in that glucose and puts it together in ATP molecules. So cellular respiration is how we go from the food we eat to the ATP in our cells that's making things happen. All right. And then, as I mentioned before, and you don't need to write this down because these I think are going to be familiar to everybody, but we generally, in living organisms, energy is stored in these carbon compounds. Carbohydrates and lipids are the big ones, but there's energy storage in proteins, there's energy storage in nucleic acids as well. Basically, any chemical has energy storage in it. Any molecule is going to have energy stored in it. And then the last thing that I want to mention, and this is not, you don't need to know the details of what I'm about to show you. I just want to remind you of something that I think you probably learned in chemistry. But carbon is unique because it has 4 valence electrons, which means it can form 4 bonds, or it can form like combinations of bonds and double bonds or even triple bonds. And that allows for a couple of really cool things to happen. One thing is that you can make these really long chains of carbon atoms, and then you can, like, other stuff can be attached to those chains. It's like building with Legos. You just keep adding onto it, and then you can have stuff that does stuff in there as well. With 4 attachment points, there's lots of flexibility. You can have branching. So you can, instead of just having one straight chain of carbons, you can have a chain of carbons and then another chain that's attached to it, so you can make these really complex shapes. You can have, as I mentioned, double bonds. So those are stronger than single bonds, and again, I think you learned this all in chemistry, but you can have carbon-carbon double bonds, or carbon can bind to other elements with double or even triple bonds. And then of critical importance to living organisms is that you can get these rings of carbon compounds. So carbon can attach to itself in a kind of a circular shape, and you can get, it can be 5, there can be 6. There's, you know, there's not a like, mostly it's 5 or 6, but because of geometry, but it's not limited to one specific thing in theory. Okay, so that is part of the chemistry basics, and I think that is all review for all of you. But if there's something in here that you need a little bit of help with, I am very happy to talk to you about it. But if all that made sense, then we're good and we'll move on. And what I want to do next is have you. Work on the mung beans. And so I was bragging actually, some students earlier, because my mung beans came out so good. I just put them in just to kind of make sure that everything would work. And I'm not great with plants. I basically extinguished most of the plants that I've come into contact with over the years. But these looked really good. I think I packed these up on Monday. By Wednesday, they were already sprouting. Today, we've got some visible growth. So what I'm thinking is that we'll do 2 sets of measurements, one on Monday, one on Wednesday. And what your job is going to be today is to get things set up and germinating. What I have for you are plastic bags, and there's paper towels, so you can, if you want, you could kind of come up and look at what I did, but there's nothing fancy. I just took a paper towel down wet, and not soaking wet, but just like I got it damp, folded it over the mung beans, and then put it in a plastic bag. I left the bag open so it didn't mold, and it seemed to work pretty well. The mung beans themselves are here, and there's enough for you and your group everybody can have 10 of these. And what I had suggested the other day is that 3 treatments seems like a reasonable number. So if you work in a group of 3, each of you could be responsible for one of those treatments. If you wanna try some other things, I have some other things as well. I think these are mung beans, but there's also some beans and some peas, and so you could play around with other seeds if you want. If there's anything that you need from me that you're not seeing already in the room, just let me know, and I'll go grab it. If it's something like, we might not have everything, but I'm guessing that for the most part, you'll either be doing things where you have complete control over your treatments, or you need something from me that we actually do have in the stock room. So it is 11:08, and I think it's probably, like, let's take 15 minutes total to take a break, get your mung beans set up. If you need more time than that, I can give you more time, but I think that's probably gonna be plenty. Make sure you like label your bags and stuff. You can just, I would just put a little slip of paper in the bag with your name on it and the treatment. and then at about 11, what did I say, 15 minutes, 11:23, let's check in here. And if you need more time, I can give you more time, but I think that's probably gonna be. All right, does anybody have any questions? Okay.